정말 다시 delay 네 냠도 되니 말아서 로사바 니동 니슈 짜니기 정말야 참지 다시 delay 몽부슈비스.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. And also all best wishes for this new year, 2022, which we are starting here together.
아니 데네 달로 니슈 니동 니슈 짜니기 드링 페이지 니니바 있어요. 데네 당라서 로니 니동 니슈 다 니동 니슈 짜지 로니 말아서 다 잠랭들라 네얌 두부디 랩체데네 미상마 다지당게 초대레 야나 아니 총레 다 이코노믹 데네심 기셈타레 다 직낭 에 간수거래 말아서 다 냠뉴 망보지 로니파 조사와레스 다 로사바 니동 니슈 짜니디 데네 말아서 상메 다 냠뉴 침보디 나네 데네 말아서 추엘라 직 람라 야 버죽 투베기 느바다 아니 지 랑기 미세기 땡라 초대이나레 총이나레 가리기 토레나 냠뉴 딜라테니 데니 지양 자지 니도 니슈 짜니라 지 야보지 용 투베기 느바 아니 냠룹 지니 데니 말아서 처음에게 가서 거를 몰람 야보지 나나 로사베치도 아니 제 number regular the bigul shugis
And so for most of us here today is the second day of 2022. And as we start this new year, it's already been 2 years, 2020 and 2021, that since the pandemic has started raging across the world and brought so many bad experiences in terms of everybody's health and the economy, a lot of worry, a lot of fear that we've all been experiencing since the pandemic started now 2 years ago. So this being the case now with this new year, 2022, starting based on all of this experience that we've had, these experiences that we've had, I would like to ask you all to make the best aspiration, the best wishes that with this experience, strong with these experiences, we can now enter the path of the Dharma, and also so have the capacity, have the capability to truly enter into the path of the Dharma, and also have the ability to bring all these experiences into bettering our health, more successful business, and into all our endeavors for this new year. So we can all put some effort into making these wishes and aspirations for the new year.
드링 주된 되니 말아서 피지 드링 야세 모주 동미기 제베드니 야세 라레 소디마데데 드니다 딜라 동마르게와 레기드 파르게와 슝기드 주기게와 타마르게와 주기드에서 숨미레스 던제 숨지 데나네 데네 동마르게와 레기드 딜라더니 가도 추버제와다 잠버 담자와니 송사바레 아니 니바 드링갑스 바바디 handa bardu kewa shungi den dela teni ngondo chola juksu da ngoji kebusum gelamla juksu sin ni yores de nane de tring aranzo tangbo ngondo chola juksu dela en sabji namba dun du swa dun ji nane de tangbo de song chaware daju dun yoba de song cha tring sabji niba payur pamba singi de la thuk de yores.
So the topic of today's Dharma talk is Yese Nishotokme's 37 practices of the Bodhisattvas. And within this text, among the three virtues of the virtue of the activity in the beginning, the virtue of the text in the middle, and the virtue of the conclusion at the end, we have already gone over the virtue in the beginning, which consists in the homage and the pledge to compose. And we have now arrived at the virtue in the middle, the virtue of the text. And the main part of the text consists in two sections. First, the manner of engaging in the preliminary activities, and then the path of the beings of the three types of capacities. So among these two, we are now in the first, the manner of engaging in the preliminary activities, and these consist in 7 elements. And we have already gone over the first, which was the precious human body with the freedoms and advantages. And we are now on the second preliminary, which is abandoning one's homeland.
That during each day the go mazu ngala tene yanja ni ke number chama la tene chi tensu chi shugi is the tensu de na che shu be kap su na re nyem be kap su na re tene chi sam be kap su na re tene gom be kap su na re ta kare chugi chi chawa kare namba ina ya dingwen de la tene chi kulong di jue de geshen gore kulong ta de nge ma shu cha ba indi ta chen su chi kulong yin de kulong de kulong chi ge rang chi bo ma yin ba tene simje tham je ko ba dong a ji ja so de le dal de tene nam je so ba san ji ko ba am ni chi ge 장주 sembe ko pan se orda dendeji gi thobai gi chedu deni tirenga de yase to yase la le so de ma de deni ngi sam de kulong dendeji kulong gi to ni na ni ji pendo chimbo am ni ji de gi nuba chimbo yores.
And before we start this Dharma talk, then, I would like to remind you all, as before, that before any Dharma activity, whether it is listening to the Dharma, contemplating it, or meditating on it, it is extremely important to always set one's motivation. And that motivation being that we are not doing so only for ourselves alone, but we are doing so in order to free all beings from the ocean of suffering, which is samsara, and establish them on the level of Buddhahood or the levels of the Bodhisattvas. And so please please think in this way, that today you are listening to this teaching on the 37 practices of the Bodhisattvas to that aim, for that objective. If you engage in any Dharma activity with this type of motivation, then it will be extremely beneficial and very powerful to do so.
that's the name. The Niba Pailbonga said the Zawi Gitsik the Yingi Chola, the Chudar Yu, Dai Chola, Shedang Medar Bar, Langdur Jibi, Timu Minachi, Pailbonga Jasila Yins. The Pailbongo Jumzi, that I'm boarding around the Gigoma, the Daju Melurumbuche, Tobe the Niakaba Indu, the top areas, also. Yupe Tangsum Gigoni, Daju Melurumbuchi top, yeah. Then, yeah, Daju Melurumbuchi top, but yeah, so not that, yeah, the Tola Madame Chine, Chuyabuji to Bores and Kazanoma Sombre. That Chu Yabuji, Tuber Javala, Maranzo Tungi Mambuji, Zomgur. The Tungi Yabuji Mazona, the name Maranzo Tambo, Solam Kapsu Indu, Maranzo Chige. Le dambo ba indu tini lamsang nyomong pang to mare nyomong ma pang na tini chi tharba na thamji yimbu ba ma ya thop thop mare ti indu le dambo indu ngarang zo ti thungi mangbo ji di thog ne tini khaso gore khale khale chi tini chi nyomong pang chi tabla chen go the Indo that drink comes about the pile pong said that's why Apoji Chiguena that pile the Parji Chadu Parji Chadu Parji Church Cheverjivala Church Chebe Capsu pile said the Parji Yuji Chad the Indo that pile pong said the daily drink.
So today we start on verse 2, the second preliminary step, which is abandoning one's homeland. And this verse reads as follows: the practice of all the Bodhisattvas is to leave behind one's homeland, where our attachment to family and friends overwhelms us like a torrent, while our aversion towards enemies rages inside us like a blazing fire, and delusion's darkness obscures what must be adopted and abandoned. So previously we've established that, we've established by way of the cause, by way of the example, and by way of numerical comparison, that we have obtained the precious human body with all the freedoms and advantages. And we've discussed how, having obtained this precious human body with all the freedoms and advantages, one should not waste it, but instead apply it to practicing the Dharma correctly. However, in order to practice the Dharma correctly, one needs to gather many conducive conditions, because if one does not have all the conducive conditions necessary for the practice of Dharma, then it is very difficult for us as beginners on the path of accumulation to abandon or to discard the afflictive emotions. It's very difficult as a beginner to discard afflictive emotions very quickly. And if one, however, if one does not discard the afflictive emotions, it is not possible to reach the level of liberation, the state of liberation or of omniscience. So for that reason, one needs to slowly put effort into distancing oneself or into discarding the afflictive emotions. And that is why abandoning one's homeland comes up here, because one's homeland is actually an obstacle to good Dharma practice.
Payula kansu yoresena pa yore ma yore tene rangi chembo yore jumbo da ajang ani bingya da sama yore tokpo tongmo payula da disama zomde tadi payula ni mangboji zomde ni setu da bingya re pama re tene tokpo tongmo sama zomye gore 가지 데 좀용도 니라 가려 연구르스나 되니 차바지 연구르 짐바움 차바지 연구르 니에세 녜게 아마 녜게 바바 녜게 다부 부모 녜게 독포 동모세도 녜세도 왜 차바지 연구르 차바지에서 유나 맨나 슉치쇼지 다 파유샤 연구르 되니 녜게 파유세 간저 묘나 사지 심바지 조용도 나 파유 텐송네 아마 텐송스기도 어디 나신데 파유데 차바지에서 그 유지 차용데 다 니 요사나 델라 다지가 용그레 데 저샤케사게 유지나 델라 셰당케사에 유지 용그레 가지 네 파마 네 빙자라 마강이 미지나 lumba디나 로라 데니 계자 몽고시게 네 아말라 두자라 네 파발라 두자라 네 빙자라 두자 토포 토모 두자라나 데 랍게 미델라야 데니 유델라야 가서 셰당게 용그레 다 도샤단 시단이 디 나랑서 차도를 강바 주다 한국 차낭식 지 강모 에바의 유연도 한국 차 니도래 디도 창바지에서 여자는 될라 시단 연구를 니 진에 시단의 인기 졸라 도샤 추더요스 배추 림바도 거란 마조에 거도 좋아요 말다 디 율디 lumba지 칠로 마템 버도 창바데 유여 바래 ini dela dai chola shedang meter bars tati chakpa de yochana digi cha jindu shedang de rangsing le ngure dela de shedang khongro meter bars ta meter bar ngdo se to pe khongro de pe mese gi chemboji dele sungo shedang chungjung mai shedang chembo me barjes mi soje nyenga peje mi se mi dungye dendegi shedang je ge ngures de payul de chini.
And so what this means is actually very clear here in the words of the verse itself. As it says, one's homeland where our attachment to family and friends overwhelms us like a torrent. Basically, when one remains in one's homeland, that's where everyone is, right? That's where our parents are, our older, younger siblings, our aunts and uncles, all our friends, all our close ones, our relatives are in one's homeland. And so that being the case, there are that many more objects towards which we are attached, towards which we have clinging. It's in our homeland where there are the most objects of our attachment and our clinging. That's why when we go someplace else, when we leave home, we say we're homesick, we're missing our parents, we're missing our friends, and so on, right? And so the flip side of that is wherever there is attachment means there is also anger. Because there are so many objects of our attachment, there are also objects of our anger, or enemies, one could say. As it says, while our aversion towards enemies rages inside us like a blazing fire. When there are so many people we are attached to, if someone harms or speaks badly to our parents, our friends, our relatives, then we get angry at that person, the one who harms our close ones. And so in this way, really, attachment and aversion are two sides of the same coin. They're like a pair that goes together, like the two legs of a person, always coming together in a pair. So where there are objects of our attachment, there will necessarily also be objects of our anger. And attachment flows like a river, the text says, like a torrent, without an end. It just always continues with no end. And in the same way, its counterpart, anger also arises whenever there is attachment, and like raging inside us like a blazing fire. Means not just small anger, but the type of anger that makes you want to kill someone or beat someone or hurt them badly.
That touching the fire, the pang se the fire se the pangore se the fire de la da kodang mangboji je mangbo kodang mangboji du tadi rana su se pen melara ba ta buji na ani korang fire rang la shukje ani fire rang le kaso gore nyamle chene tene 콩 두바 톱제 네 제보양 중월에서 멜라를 받아보지나 파유랑 슈그니 파유방요 말에 파유랑 슈그요레스 따딩 예바요 말에 단다 파유세디 타직도 파유디 내가 나랑도 낭 강바 파마 대사 지보 많이 봐 단다 값이 봐봐 세디 파유세디 뇨몽바 가와 펠기요나 뇨몽바 가와 체사 유몽 독숨기네 다보지 가와 이나에 딜라 파유스네 나랑도 샤추그레스 어디 다보지 파유도 방세마도 파유세디 녜세다 다세 된주 참마 로래야 다샤버마도 된라 녜 빙자세다 직 다세디 된라 두베요 마레스 디 인도산 단다 조 단다 값 바바 파유세디 가와 데나야 딜라 독숨 펠사기 사자딜라 파유스네 샤추그레스 타직도 파유세디 인지비 빵고 독숨 끼기로서네 멜라르 바타보이나 데니 파유랑라 두바톱제 디부충어레 양 가레 멜라르 두바톱 등아서 토 말이 인지비 빵고레스 디타직 숨고요 말에 저조 단다값수 바바 녀몽 독숨 펠사 가와 이나야 딜랑아서 파유시잖아 디기요레스 파유세도 랑 계사가 롱바딜라 파유세기요라
Now, then again, with this word homeland, there's many ways we can understand this or we can explain this. Because, for example, if you think of Milarepa did not leave his homeland. He actually practiced in his own homeland and achieved siddhi, achieved the fruition without abandoning his homeland. So it's not that it's a definite thing, that one must necessarily abandon one's homeland. It's not really about the homeland as the place where one's parents and relatives are and so on. Actually, what matters, the point here, what we should understand in terms of the homeland is that it's the place where our afflictive emotions, the three poisons, multiply or increase. So whichever place is a source for a lot of afflictive emotions for us, that is what we need to abandon. Because really, when you think of it in terms of like homeland, relatives, close ones or enemies, none of these truly exist. They're all just imputations of the mind. They don't have substantial existence. So it's not so much about the whatever we impute as the homeland itself, but it's really about the place that increases our afflictive emotions, that increases our three poisons. That is the homeland that we need to abandon. Because otherwise you might say, well, Milarepa didn't abandon his homeland, and yet he still achieved siddhi, he still achieved the fruition. So why should we abandon our homeland? So that's not the point. We shouldn't take it so literally, but rather think of the homeland as the place where that causes the three poisons to increase, to proliferate for us. But in general, of course, homeland, we understand as being our birthplace, right?
제도다 차당 되자 시당 띠묵숨 따디 숨 펠사 디숨 독숨 디 펠사기 사자지 요사나 되니 최라 최치 나랑서 베나 최 지용도 들라 바지 레 당보기 강사지나 들라 바지 침보 연구래 아니 대 가리 연구로서나 땅 알아서 최 지긴지 인도 최 지긴디기 가르치기로서나 되니 단다 마와라 직 숨바데 랑더지비 티묵 미나체 랑더세데 디니 랑자 게위추 랑자다 도르자 미기비 미기비추스나다 미게와 주다고다 드니 독숨 디 귤라테네 드니 지게 요몽바 필겐다 드니 카리 요바이나 드니 파 도르자 파 도레기 디디 가자거선 독숨 체 망다나 되니 디 랑자 가리 임바다 도르자 가리 임바디 하고고요 말. 고 바지 독숨고 왕도 송도 되니 나라서 티무 지게 니 투부지 나신 살보 메바지. 되네 지금 알라 페나 민바 나포 나라 레토지다 오지 마리 숨기 팁니. 되네 대용도 되니 랑자 도르자 지 게와다 미게와니 예와 체시기 말에 디 예와 체 마시나 되니 게와 양다고지 둑투고 말에 살람기 연뇌양 셰투고 말에 디 살람기 연뇌 마시에 마투나 되니 타르바 담지 김비 고바 토베 나라줄라 칼바요 말에 데칼레 카보레스 디 인도 데라 랑더 제비 티무 미나 제스 랑자 단 도르자 파제 두고요 다이 야가다 카리 이메 두부다 카리 이메 페제 하고고요 말다.
And so for a beginner Dharma practitioner, remaining in the place where the afflictions of attachment, anger, and ignorance proliferate is an obstacle to practicing the Dharma, a great obstacle for a beginner practitioner. And what does this obstacle consist in? This is said in the next line. Delusion's darkness obscures what must be adopted and abandoned. So what must be adopted are the virtues, and what must be abandoned are the non-virtues, basically the three poisons and all actions motivated by the three poisons. And delusion is like darkness in which we cannot clearly see what must be adopted and what must be abandoned. When we sink into the deep darkness of delusion, we cannot differentiate between virtue and non-virtue. And when that is the case, we cannot distinguish the qualities of the righteous path, and not knowing which is the authentic path, it is extremely difficult to have the good fortune to actually reach the state of liberation and omniscience. So this is what happens in one's homeland, is sinking into this delusion that prohibits us from knowing the difference between good and bad.
But Maranzo Dile di Nyomomba Dojada Shedan Ongunjur Tati the Baksha Shukchimbo Shayona Dojada Shedan Digi. Tini Didi Shukcher the Nyamdo Tini Timugia Leongures Timuxitu Tako Yawachi Mishiv Tini Maranzo J Mogoa Temba J Mogoa Sama Temba J J Goya the Temba Maji Tini Dendres Nipa Chige Notul Mambo Jichai Gures Doja de la Shukchumbola Teni Tini Shedan Shukchumbo de la Teni Tadi Kendi Zodi Payulachin Leongura Nienda Dosha Teni Dai Chola Shedan Ningi Chola Dosha Chusi Duzani 되샤데 양저 추나신고 무튼이 레옹고여레스 다이졸라 셰당 메다 바르스 두자니 셰당 디기 칸슨 슈크초 바령도 색두고레 나랑 유가랑 요베기 윤데 탐지 마색 마 메와스르고스 메 파르니파 데나지 인도 메 타르세요 데니 디냠도 티무데 레옹 티무 먼저 슈크초 레옹 두자니 얘기 되니 나라서 노트 망고지 지용도 되니 다 랑도르당 랑제 개와당 dorje migiwa 상마 되니 티모나시 파 차양도 나랑졸라 되니 이 레가 상마 쳔버지도 버스 디 슈크춤버지 레오나 아니 디 렙사기 다 조디 율린도 룽바디인도 파일인도 디 파일도 방고레스 되니 디 강들라 파일 방와 자세 라글린 예 송도와 데 장주 심바 남지기 라글린 차데기레스 파일디 방나.
And so when one has a very strong attachment or anger, with that habit, with that latent tendency for attachment and anger, also that is what brings about very thick delusion, very strong ignorance, not being able to make this distinction between good and bad, forgetting everything that one should remember, and remembering everything that one should forget. And that leads to making many mistakes. And so this all comes from having strong anger and attachment. Basically, in one's homeland, the very strong attachment that one feels for our loved ones, which runs like a river, because it's just a continuous torrent that flows again and again, as well as the anger that one has for our enemies, which rages like fire because it burns up all our good qualities. These two together then bring about very thick delusion, very thick ignorance that causes us to make many mistakes, not recognizing the difference between the virtues that one should adopt and the non-virtues that one should abandon. And forgetting about all that we should be doing. And so the source of these very strong emotions is the homeland, which is why it is said here that to abandon one's homeland is the practice of the Bodhisattvas.
간송으로서나 강라 트바 요발레 박체 자이 8월 도와초 강라 녀몽 예베 대다도 유잠식도 네버 미자 오성을 강라 트바 요발레 세토산이 강사자들라 다 트바스나 녀몽 바세고라 대다 트바스도 다 트바도 영원히 바로 네세 코세다 지기 얘기 졸라 직 너바지 자오는 델라 람상 아주 직 랑축축 되니 직 파츠바 잡쇼쇼 간라 트밤 저바 유발레 박치 자이 바로 들어와죠 근데 요새게 처치긴지이나 근데 사제절 마대바지니 박치 자 바로 박치 자기 바로 다른 뭐질라 도고레세 아니 강라 뉴몽 유베 대다도 가와예나의 뉴몽바 펠사기 사제지요나 다디 랑게 율네나레 랑게 율마이니나레 참강레 나레 참라도는 뉴몽마고 펠도게나데니 양 야고 차게요 바로 율디 데인도 다 레당볼라 나서 칼리카고요도 율디 페게좀 버티 데인도 강라 뉴몽 유베 대다도 유잠시도 네버미자스 페나미 뉴몽바 요새 사자 저랑 미니 계제시에 되게는 폴리티션데 야나 미치기치로 독자 랍 데바레 커피숍 데와 마데 데요 마디 데나 랑기 뉴몽바 당본에 박차 유두자니 람사텔라 톡 드로타 데니 나랑소야 디 냠보 티두 심리 야나 되자시래 야나 셰당기 줄라 야나 티모 제라 코 티두 디기 켄진 de kangla nyumong yube de da do yu zam shi de ne primi jas yu de ga je ma de ba je dro sha war lam sa sa je do su ku yang bo sa je ji le pa dro ni sem ba ku yang bo sha go de sem de la sang ko be do nang de sum dus
Laksan shupido.
oh laksam
Ah, laksam.
laksam ko be dos
And so as it is said in the sutra establishing the superior mindset, wherever there is conceptual proliferation and dispute, wherever there are afflictions and disputes or infighting, which always happen, right? Arguing about this and that. From that place, you should distance yourself 100 miles. So to reformulate that, from any place where there is much afflictive emotion and much arguing, separate yourself from that place, distance yourself from that place 100 miles off. And wherever there are afflictive emotions, do not remain even one instant. So wherever there are afflictive emotions, can be any place. It can be your own homeland or anywhere else. It can even be your retreat place. If your retreat place is a place where your afflictive emotions proliferate, then that might also be a problem, right? So as it is said, wherever afflictive emotions proliferate, do not remain even one instant. So any place, this applies to anywhere. If going to the coffee shop where a lot of people are talking and whatnot is a cause for you to give rise to various emotions, that tendency to always be kind of led by the nose by the afflictive emotions, just our emotions kind of running after just being led by the conditions that surround us immediately, giving rise to attachment or aversion based on the outside circumstances. But whatever place this may be, don't stay there even an instant, but go someplace else where you can find some more peace and quiet.
the subject niwa dire payul pongwa de se da duksum gi jumne di jungsa gi ne de payindu paydu pong sige da payul pong da subject da subject sumba emba temba se di da dan ye duksum jungsa gi ne di payindu payu pong sige da payu dila dan ye shuba na shin rang kesa gi payu chibu mai ba duksum kesa gi saja kawaii na di payu chade gore di pong sikta di pong ne ta kawa dogor sena ta ngara zo chue chi ji indu 장주 semba gewis 장주 semba na konzo kon namba kandi nange yoresena ta ngara zo saja dosa de duksum di ngazo gogo yo mare yende mare duksum di ta korwai gi gyure de ndo dele ngazo pa tharne sajer thar mujil togo samgere de ta kawa dogor sana ngazo tensa de ta emba tengo emba de khare khana sin tengo sana yunde tamje gi jungsa gi ne daw chaamdo de ndo emba tengo res ta emba tanji de duksum jungsa de ne di payu pong ta yunde gi jungsa saja ji ngazo tengo re di emba res ta emba tense de sabji sumba le res.
So in this way, the homeland being the place, the source for the proliferation of our three poisons, we should abandon our homeland. And that was the second preliminary activity. The third is to rely on solitary places. So having abandoned the homeland, which as I explained, is not just our birthplace, but is actually any place which is a source of proliferation of the three poisons. Having abandoned this homeland, where should we go? Well, as Dharma practitioners, if we act in the manner of the Bodhisattvas having abandoned the place which is the source of the three poisons, because of course the three poisons are what we want to discard. The three poisons are not the source of any quality, but instead of any good quality, but instead they are the very cause of samsara. So abandoning the place which is the source of the three poisons, where do we go? Well, we go to a solitary place, which is the source of all good qualities. So while the homeland is the source of the three poisons and the place which we must abandon, the solitary places are the sources of all good qualities which we should remain in.
Embassy the Chitang the embassy na mi mangbo mesa mi Chitang gi ji ke sangasingi mesa nyokta sangasingi mesa tene kanseboreda lumba sacha te khangba mangbo shira mesa ta dende jigla chige sacha dela kerangdang ta shingna inare kusimbu chige mesa sacha jigla embassy do ta khaze tongba senare mi mesa tende mesa ta khaze sangasingi mesa jigla embassy gidu hota dende jila emba dende jila thangpo tengo sa ta di mangchewa de thanda kapsu baba changju semba dela ya teni changju semba aranzo la le thangbo dawo jila shagi yosare ta changju semba peje sa top sajo denzo la da dende saja drogu yu mare khonamba te ji saja le keba yu mare sim khorangi tone tok sa na ko ji namdo chamje 로직 도 차도 코라 코나발라지 디 파르지 중고 요즘 말다 다나 가라도 값수 봐봐들라 초글람 레당보 값수 강사지라 송고 요사 엠바데도 게침 보임베
And so what we mean here by solitary place is a place where there aren't many people. There isn't a lot of human noise, like we don't hear a lot of people talking, a lot of busyness, where there aren't many problems, aren't many troubles, where there aren't many houses. So, for example, somewhere in the countryside, where it is quiet, an empty type of space. That's what we mean here by solitary place, a place where there isn't much busyness, there isn't much going on. This is the type of place that we should remain in. As a beginner Bodhisattva. So here in this context, this is really addressing beginner Bodhisattvas, because for Bodhisattvas who have reached the grounds of realization, of course, they don't really need to remain in solitary places. It doesn't make much difference to them where they are really, since they have realized the true nature. They have realized the one taste of all of their thoughts. So that being the case, the place they're in cannot be an obstacle to them, as it is for a beginner bodhisattva. So really, the text here is addressing beginner bodhisattvas.
Embadila Takaji Peja Chiginangola Embassy Adela Tsering sheet of Jishagitus Tsering sheet of Jidu Chiginan the Tambo de leg per council for a leg per niece as do Deni can say Nesans Sasang Drogsang said the sheet of do. The ne embassy de la young emba tajik to Jig Rangjibu Jitanda Tinsan Chija Dunzo Aranzo na Jig the adventure kind Jig Droguda Jibu Kala Mevashi Shina Gil Jugdo me Mesa Lumba Tomba Jil Drog Jugdo the day you go somebody that then I cannot church again Jena Aranzo Suzuki Letambo church again Jikansa Jina. Any leg barnier says that Kala never de to Maraya. Pena the Mela Rebata, Sanji Jumne de Tabujina, the Konamba Chig Suzuki Mare Kansa, Konamba Chig Sosa Mundu Sonsabi Kansa Jindu, that Jigger Konambala Chig Yamlena Yamdu, Chig Tosadu, the Niji Shala She Mugue, the Niji Tugure. That Naranzo Kansa Suzuki Tabujina. Leg per nye situzani thambo chenyi di ta sa emba ina ya pena yang dini ma kilometer kilo peje nga truk yang na choose ki sa ja lungba yo sa ji leg per nye situ yang khala yo sa sa ji mi di khala kya thube rang ina dawa chi la cha chi ni do thup sa leg per nye situ khala nye sa Saja dinde yosaji dogor madoyang pet khona solitary tapoji dojana dawaji khala meshi dujirate choji dugmares tangbodi
And so regarding the solitary place, one text describes the 4 characteristics of such a place. The first being that it provides the good conditions. The second, that it's well situated. The third, it's good land. And the fourth, there are good companions there. So when we talk about a solitary place or a remote place, we're not talking about the type of thing we see today where people go on sorts of adventures and they're like all alone in the wild and they have to find their own food and forage and all of that. That's not what we're talking about here. As a beginner Dharma practitioner, you can't go without food, right? Milarepa, of course, having already reached realization, attained the grounds of realization, perfected the accumulations and so on, based on his previous practice, Milarepa could go without much food at all, without a food source and so on. But we as ordinary beings, we need to be in a place which has this first characteristic, which is that it provides the right circumstances, it provides all the necessities that we have. So for that reason, sure, it should be remote, but not so remote that we cannot get provisions. So perhaps 5, 6, maybe 10 kilometers away from the next village, so that at least once or twice a month, we can go get food, or we can somehow be provided with food. Because of course we can't just go a whole month without food. We would die, and that is not helpful to practicing the Dharma. So for that reason, that is the first characteristic of a solitary place, is a place with all the right provisions.
Nesans do young 지금 사자 단다디 돈도 와일 심지 지금 요사 마임바 지금 사자양 미망보 지금 뉴 배낭아주 때 쪼참 로사 되는 거도 미망보 쪼참 진이 참사 된들래양 참되는 미망보의 디스트립 차이로 된대야 마임바 네 상수도 자냐 배 사자 고양보 될라 심지 돈도 된데 직나야 매바 되네 미야 디스트립 지게야 매바 되네 지게 네 상보 되네 지게 사자 고양보 빼나 단다 샤나다 등산 네 망치라한테 미 상승 망보 연구도 빼나 나라 빼다고 샤나 뭐마 밀레레바 자부 다 구르르베지게 자부 네 회사당 되네 뭐마게 기진 담바남 남바기 슈사 되네게 네 되냐면 시사게 네 다 등산 망치보다 지금 미 상승 레전 디스트로바 연구를 되네게 네 아니 뭐마 밀레레바이나야 되네 로르지여레 पेन मिलर बा तने लुंबा ने या शुक दे उंदु तने छम शुक आपसो ते मी मंगबो जेगा ले उंदु जने मिलर बा न्यामने छेले डिस्ट्रिक्ट छा उंदु भर्जी शु दे मिलर बा साजे शिंबाजी लु फेनि साजे शिंबाजी लु जुक्सों रे सेदु एंडे जिन पेप्सों yang pa de yang ni lungba shimba mi de le yang ji yang de ni pa ji chue ni yang saje shimba ji le pesong res ta de ne 상보 마임바 이사자 마임바체 네 상보 시두잔데니 근데 지금 디스트로 메사게 사자 네다고 근데 지금 고요사데 니바디 네 상스
The second characteristic of a solitary place, which is that it should be well situated, means it shouldn't be a place, for example, where there are many wild animals, or where there are many people about who either live around there or who might come there, visiting as tourists and so on, and cause a lot of disturbance. So a quiet place that neither has disturbances caused by wild animals or by human beings. And of course, such a quiet place nowadays is quite rare, right? Nowadays, most places are quite busy. Unlike in the past, the places where Milarepa, Guru Rinpoche, and all these great masters of the past, great meditators of the past, the caves and so on, where they practiced, were very solitary and quiet at the time. But today these are places that often have a lot of people coming to visit and so on. So nowadays many places, unlike before, are prone to a lot of disturbance by people, and this actually is similar to the story in Milarepa's life story. It's said that Milarepa would find a quiet place to do retreat, and then the people of the village nearby would start coming to see him. And so people would come and cause disturbance and basically create obstacles to his practice. So then he would leave and go to another place, another remote, quiet place to continue his practice there. But then again, the people of the nearby village would come and create all sorts of disturbances. So in this way, what we need for practice is a place that is well situated in the sense that we won't be facing a lot of disturbances of the sort.
네, 숨바디다 사상세, 숨바다 시바디 족상 사상세도 되니 사양 되니 등산 되다다 말아서 직당게 체육바 시작이나 사상세도 전에 되니 즉 나자 용사게 사자 마임바 pena zorboyosa de dena de ya na yongura na yongna den chöchela ya parji yongure de du sa sansu de tu yosa de ge sa ja mayimba pena tanda dawena kupit nasa min nasa mambo na degyo na dewa cham dega ene tani pije sa sambo mewa dabo sajadi tani kashi yang tukje dang nacha yongsa ki sajadi yungudo tende la tene nga zo nacha mambo na yongna khala zo yakbo mayimba chogo xie dang sa ki chini tende yongna tende mayimba sa sambo ji saja yakbo sa sambo ji dhoya de gechumbo yinsari emba teni shiba de dhokse yang tanga tanga rangzo kaansa kore le tangbo yido yang rangchibu dhona dhigyo yomar maangchiwa tingsa rangchibu dhugyo yore tajiga solitary se kore chamsi do rangchibu dhona da mi chama namying ni pa kaansa kore rangchibu deshana namying mewa chagiri esine de rangchibu dhoshagido 근데 네 마임바 단다 독상스도 양 달래 당보 인도 양 초보야 보지 고요서래 지게 최기 통내야 지 초보차 고양랑 독발에나 지사 되니 야지 나차라 중나양 딜라 따기 양지 로바도지 지게 최적도지 약보지랑 니가 파수 지게 답든 시겐 딜라 지게 understanding 요겐인데 미주에나 되니 독상세디 시바디 된 도야 보지에나 되니 추기 도차도 니가라 파펜 수펜 되니가에 되니 지가 추제발라 되니 냠도치네 되니 지게 바지 메베 돈네 된 랑기 두바이 토토베당 근데게 디보연 중에 게 겐지게서 지기지로
And so the third characteristic is that it should be a clean place. So not a place where it is very easy to fall sick, not a dirty place where there are a lot of illnesses, bacteria, poisonous type of things. Where one would easily fall ill, which of course is also an obstacle to Dharma practice. So for example, nowadays, a place where there's a lot of COVID wouldn't be a very good place to do practice. So any place where there are a lot of viruses or bacteria, things that might make us sick, might make us have gastric problems and so on. These types of places should be avoided. And then the fourth characteristic is good companions, which are important for beginners. Nowadays, a lot of people, as beginners, even think that they should go to retreat alone. If they're completely alone, then they won't have any distractions, and so they kind of go to retreat all by themselves. But actually, as a beginner, it's best to have a good companion, someone one might be able to ask questions when one has doubt, someone who might take care of us if one is ill, basically someone with whom we can mutually help each other, mutually support each other in the practice, someone who has a good understanding of the methods of practice and so on. So for mutual support, so that both people help each other in progressing in the Dharma practice towards achieving Siddhi and achieving the fruition, so that each one acts as a conducive condition to the practice of the other. That is actually quite necessary as beginners to have such a good companion.
Embatem be pain, the Quran danda Sumba, Embatemba ni se the dos subject Sumbat. Yungen pong with Numo rim gidip, Naming may be gajur angipel, Rigba down be chola nishiki, Embatemba Jazel yin said the didi Embatem be painting yours.
So these are the 4 characteristics of a solitary place. And now as for the benefits of remaining in a solitary place, these are described here in this 3rd verse of the text, which reads, "The practice of all the Bodhisattvas is to take to solitary places, avoiding the unwholesome so that destructive emotions gradually fade away. And in the absence of distraction, virtuous practice naturally gains strength, whilst with awareness clearly focused, we gain conviction in the teachings." So these are the benefits of remaining in a solitary place.
다니게 슈바나지 연대기 중년의 엠바레 세요도 다 율녜바디 랑싱게 파 빵차레 알선이 엠바테요도 연대 답변아 다니 공도 슈바나시 엠바디기 연대 사망의 슈임바 다디 페인디 용의 방에 녀모림지데서 율녜바디 빵도 녀몽바 페나 되샤케사게 율 셰당케사게 율 된저 참마 이 타지고 상만의 빵 돌게 말해대 대 뇽으로 땅 뇽으로 수르잠지 뇽몽바 충으로 차게 요레스 대 너자네 뇽몽바야마 딥스 너자 뇽으로 차게 요레스 에 뇽몽바 타지도 상만파 빵 도그레스나 대 빵도 말 똑잠지 슉충으로 뇽몽바 슉충으로 두거래 가르스나 유르게마데 빵에 너자네 그 automatic 세버 인지kel마서나 이 뇽으로 차두고 요레스 용의 방 뇽몽린 비티스도 되게 페인치게요래 야나 윤데 직 대용그레스 엠바테나 아니 윤데 니바데 엠바테용도 나밍 메베 게즈랑하게 펠스 지게 나랑도 셈기 나밍 중사조디 다지게 두지 나밍 세지도 상하싱이 다지 빙자레 사자레 테니지 레가 망보지 차용도 산 엠바테소나 디 레가 상마 yang automatic for mewa chaandu teni ko naming yengsa yo marta yengsa ge yul me yondu teni sem yengi marta jingdang da sem yul taji khaso kore ra lege mare sem de la ra lege semba de zo ra ta kawa drona ya ta le dangbo kapsula ta sem dang teni yul de ya ta samsam na jo parje mangbo shugu yore naming gi 지금 바제로 차 연구인도 다디도 엠바데 디기 팽겨스 뇽 초겨서 남이 메바더니 남이 메소나 되네 랑게 제비기 개와 가레 이나레 또야나 교상 검수 가레 제나야 되네 지게 디 콤펠 두고레스 디디 지기 연대 지 니바레 연대 숨바데 니 뇽몽바 상마 중로 차소나 되네 나랑도 릭바데 당마차로 당마 릭바 짱마차는 거지. 때 릭바 당마차나 되니 릭바 짱마디기 릭바 당마디기 진이 출랑에시 이게 두그랬어. 저 가르치는 게지 통그래. 때 릭바 당마면나 다니고라 뇽몽버기 독숨기 직 딥데바 마릭바도야나 티묵다버지나 되니 릭바 당마 메레. 릭바 당마 메도 진이 저 지기 샤마지 지고지나 살버 통고 말에 제두그래. 그 참마 너두고 투바 망보지 연구 단다갑서 봐봐데 남ing 매 용도자니 계주라 강게 펠 릭바양더니 당마차 더니 데 릭바 당마차 볼라 텐데는 촐랑에시 게임그레스 디엔도 엠바템바 야살라글레 세디 드니 엠바텐디 드니 장주심바 탐지게 라레 인신 송고레스.
And so, as I said before, the solitary place is the source of all good qualities. And in what way is it the source of all good qualities? As it says, avoiding the unwholesome so that destructive emotions gradually fade away. By avoiding negative objects, by avoiding objects of our attachment and our anger, not completely getting rid of all objects of attachment and aversion, because that's not possible. One can't immediately completely get rid of all objects of attachment and aversion, but at least reducing the objects of attachment and aversion, then by doing so, the afflictions will naturally decrease if one reduces such objects, tries to avoid such objects. Afflictions will naturally decrease, but not immediately disappear, but become fewer, become weaker. So our afflictions will naturally decrease, and that is the first benefit, or the first good quality that comes from remaining in a solitary place. The second is that in the absence of distraction, virtuous practice naturally gains strength. So generally, our minds are prone to a lot of distraction. We're always very busy. Wherever we live, we usually have many things to do, many tasks, and so on. But in a solitary place, all of these naturally fall away. There's much less to do, much less to be distracted by. And so in the absence of distraction, then virtuous practice naturally gains strength, because as a beginner, really our state of mind depends a lot on the place we are at. Later on in practice, this might not be so related, but as a beginner, the busyness of the place that we're in will determine also the busyness of our own minds, which can be an obstacle to our practice. So avoiding this type of distraction, which is an obstacle to practice, is the second benefit of being in a solitary place, because as distraction decreases, whatever we engage in terms of the study, contemplation, and meditation of the Dharma will be a cause for the proliferation of virtuous practice, for strengthening our virtuous practice in the absence of distraction. The third benefit, or the third good quality that comes from remaining in a solitary place, is that when the afflictions decrease, awareness is clearly focused, and so we gain conviction in the teachings. So with clear awareness, our certainty in the Dharma naturally increases. When you don't have clear awareness, when you don't have clear focus, then that is actually caused by delusion, because we are so sunk deep into delusion, we don't have clear awareness. And without such clear awareness, we cannot distinguish the genuine Dharma correctly. And so we make a lot of mistakes. We forget exactly what it is we need to practice, and so on. However, in the absence of distraction, our awareness is sharpened, our awareness becomes much clearer, and that permits us to gain certainty in the Dharma. And so these are the reasons why the practice of all the Bodhisattvas is to take to solitary places.
이제 드링 대샤샤나 sabji sumba wala empathy ba charse drink de shagis chutun.
And so with this third verse of relying on solitary places, we will end today's Dharma teaching.
In tiba ra yuna mama kazan gi tiba da drink tiba ra yuna tiba tina tigres.
And so if you have any questions, either from previous sessions or from today's session, please write them in the chat. Also, tu as ni lepson. Lasso chic di midi gegen res konki na gegen yins ni matak par tun tan de yeux tene tan yamen lela pochik son jognans
근데 냠레 렐라보스나 렐라쇼 레가 가야 마치기요 데 검자레스 검자디 코 셈바지고 레가마도 류기 레고 마레 나기 레고 마레 셈바기 토스토시 전시에다 바유 에 토니드니 셈코라 다 시니 약보지 짱니 대지기 율직라 셈제직도 양나 우 징고라 셈제직도 때네데니 데라 녜수치데니 샤나 다디 약쇼레 답데쇼 칼레요 마르스 게게인데야 튠다메다 땅소나 레가 망보 차루데 엔 다네 케 레가 디겐치도 레가 망보요 드셈 당보랑 아쿠바이 차서 다디인도 데니 가망아 추스지 릴렉스지 셈 욱징욱들라 때네데니 샤나 가망아 주 니말 가망아 주 나주 치데나 엔키랑 제마 지금 Pugula Pingere, Lobjon Sulet Rigena, Denzolaya Pingere, Ranglaya Pingeres.
The first question was, I'm a teacher. I want to practice every day. I ask you to show me the simplest practice. So the simplest practice to do is meditation, because you don't really need to do anything. It doesn't require any verbal activity. It doesn't require any physical activity. It's just mental. And so meditation means with some carefulness and mental carefulness and mindfulness, to, for example, remain within the state of calm abiding or shamatha. And to do so, one can focus one pointedly on an object, which, for example, can be one's breath. So you can just focus on your breath. And that's really the easiest practice. If you're a teacher, you probably have a lot of work. You can't do many sessions a day. And on top of that, with all the work you do, the mind might get quite agitated. So for that reason, every day to meditate for 5 or 10 minutes, just letting the mind relax and trying to focus one pointedly on the breath, will bring a lot of benefit, both to the children or whomever you are teaching, and to yourself. So that really is the easiest way to practice. So aninita lam ki tongpani ki tunda ki pe caché sama na yapo hakmasan konki ta tukula ki pe caché son jodan de lam ki tongpani ki tunda ki korla tits Pesha Shatner ki kone. Lam ki tongpani.
Lam ki tongpani.
Je tak ngai yakfo hakmason kona.
Tongpani ki pesha ne yese insare. Le da kong sungjo de lam ki tongpani se na tanda ngaranzo kapsu bawa kunjop ki kapsu kansa ta changma lam ro. Loba lam ki kapsu indu ta tongpani shirang ro chi sung yigire. Pe se na 다 pe tongpa ni se di pe yakshu rawaji ngaranzo tingsan sangye ge sungere namka di ta tongpa ki pe rawaji namka sha namka tongpa chito namka ngombo namka di pe di tongpa sha tongpa ni se di salchale shigere ni se di ngaranzo ha kogin shaking sheba dilas shigere didi pena nima dawshana digere ta nima di namga mena nima yungu mare namga late ni nima chungure ani nima de kawa yasana namga leres te namga de korang di the kawa yores chena ragi mare tongbare ina nima dita salcha salta ina di tos chiko mi hama kun jina kali yonsar nima da tongba ni de yawa do jidwa ji pe do shana jidang pe ji namkha da nima do shagi de tongni se de yana tarang sim korang ge tong ne sha ina ngarang zola thangbo sim ha goge jidwas ha goge pena ngaya pore dupure se da feelings se jidwa ha goge dire di mare se jige ha gogen jure di ha gogen kurang dila ya hoji ta ni chena di kurang yegi mares kurang dubaji jige demba dubaji yegi mares di manye badi ta tomba ya tomba tongjang rewesena dela yang salcha ji ha gogen ji duas ani di ha gogen dila ni se de tong ni se di salcha dila gogeres ha gogen dila gogere na ha gogen di temba matubaji shi matubaji ko chema matubaji ko ready ge khase chema dubaji nga ni ge yo mare di khansi ni ge yo mare na ko tongbare ta dilo on the page touching the page listening is ra shashi mi
And so the second question was, would you give some examples on what is meant by the emptiness of the path? Since we are ordinary beings, we are within the path, right? So on the relative level, from the perspective of the path, perhaps how can we explain emptiness? From that point of view is how we are interpreting this question. So then if we are to give some analogies for emptiness for ourselves from the perspective of the path that we are on, the Buddha himself compared the empty aspect to the sky, right? This big blue expanse. That is the empty aspect. Now the ness of emptiness, that is the clarity aspect, the aware aspect, the knower. And that can be likened to the sun, which is in the sky. Without the sky, there is no sun, right? The sun rises only in the sky. But if you look for the sky, it cannot be found. It's empty. But then the sun itself is yet still within the sky, which cannot be found because it is empty. Still, there is the brilliance of the sun. Yet this might be a little bit difficult to understand for those who are not familiar with these concepts, because it seems like we're making a distinction between these two. So perhaps another example one could give based on the mind itself is the mind is aware, right? There's an aspect of the mind that knows, that is aware of, I am good, I'm bad, I feel this or that, this is this, this is not it, and so on. So we have this type of aware quality to our mind. And yet, if we examine the mind, if we look for the mind, it cannot be found. Nothing, there's nothing to find there that has substantial existence, that has true existence. And the reason that no substantial entity can be found is because the mind is empty. It's empty, but that doesn't mean that it's a completely empty void. It's not a total absence, because actually within the emptiness, there's still an aware quality. There's still the knower, the knowing aspect of the mind, the aware aspect of the mind. And so that is the ness in emptiness. So despite despite the mind not being truly established, not having substantial existence, still it has this clear, aware quality, and these two together are what is meant by emptiness. These two aspects, but of course, it's very difficult to explain emptiness by way of analogy.
이 착진 몰람나에서 여바 마인 야위장 마인 마직 메바 마인 코르디꾼이 시세다. 초담제 여바 마인 야위장 마식 여바 셈데 덴바루바 쳔마루바지 여바지 산지 좀nen데게 시요 마레스 여바 마인 야위장 마식 양 메바 마인 메바 마레스 타직도 고라 메바 마레 코르디꾼지 시세스 야 코르와데 요데 데 코르와 맨나다 되는 가서 상게 베제 메와 차도 그레스 여바 쳔마루바지 양 마식 레세도 가나서 동바 이바 때문에 다 산지게 요바지 섭 덴바두바지 산지게 시요 마레스 야 메바레스나 타직도 거라 메바레스나 메바를 팔룽바레스나 마레스 양 지게 코르와 탐지 룹데바지 이 인도자네 넘버 산지게 동바니데 가도 있나 탈레 지 말롱마지 요베 탈레 말롱바 메베 탈레 말롱바 덴데지기 지게 말롱바 지게 가르스나 숭죽된 게 그래서 본주당 된담니 동바 니세디 동바다 니니디 숭죽된 게 그래서 다 데데다버지 또 톡바이나 되니 뭐네 다 산제 차로지라 산제 조지라
and so as it is said in the aspiration of Mahamudra, it is not existent. Even the Buddhas do not perceive it. It is not non-existent, for it is the ground of all samsara and nirvana. So it's not it's not that the mind is existent, for it does not have true existence. It does not have any substantial existence that even the Buddhas can find, that even the Buddhas can see. And yet it's also not that it's completely non-existent, because it's actually the ground for all of samsara and nirvana, without which there wouldn't even be any Buddhas. So even the Buddhas cannot find any true existence or any substantial existence in anything. And that is why we say that the nature is empty. Yet it's also not a complete void, a complete absence, a complete non-existence. We don't fall into that extreme, because still it gives rise to all of samsara and nirvana. So that's why when Buddhists speak of emptiness, they never fall into either of the extremes of existence or non-existence, but instead we speak of the union of the relative and ultimate truth. And that is what is meant by emptiness. And if you're able to realize this, then you reach Buddhahood, right? You become a Buddha. Lasso, tatong kandichi kiore. Lasso. Lasso. Tananso hayul pangna. Tanne. If we avoid one's homeland or situations of afflictive emotions, does it mean we avoid facing or transforming them? Facing or transforming the afflictive emotions. Nanso payul pangna ani nyunmong Pelsa Pangna the Nansu Nyunmong Yuriaki Kokap Pangi
Oh,
Marbe.
re. So the Numong Juregi Kokapran, Numong Juream, Numong Tupuena, Numotos Sabrotangai, Numon Tupuena, tos Yungrotangai, Mambo and then Yungrotang, Tupuena tos tap sue. Then they get you to council for the talk, Jane Chagires, Payul Pang. That's all the young Shubana, you pay said the Rankesa Lombajibo Mayimbo, Numomba Kesagi. 다 율 가봐 이나로 배나 남ing 중사 배나 가서 게망보 암주 고대나 셈 여행루구로 야나 지금 미 제보 망보 지 통나 등상 때때모다도 와이파이 망보나 유튜브 다 다음에 다도 된 가서 셈바디 디낭 주니 여행정도 되니 셈디 시바 강라 네 도미도 되니 뇽몽바기 죽라 토토 박자 샤고도 데도 되게 되니 나랑솔라 뇽몽바 망로 차마도 뇽르 차야기 고갑요 말레스 다 남ing 메용도 메사게 사자 도샤나 다 남ing 용사 사자 조지 파유차데 그래 아니 다 덴데네 파또 사자 고양볼 도사나 남ing 메사게 사자 도소나 자지자 코라 오토매틱 뇽로 차도 그래스 뇽로 차암나 뇽몽바 비르와테도 그래스 뇽몽바 도 고양보 차도 그래.
And so the next question was, if we avoid one's homeland or situations of afflictive emotions, does it mean we avoid facing or transforming them? It's like I said, really, it's not necessarily about avoiding one's birthplace or anything like this, but avoiding the places that cause very strong or very kind of very powerful, very strong, very hard, afflictive emotions. And so to avoid these places is to permit the afflictive emotions to decrease or to weaken a little bit, because in places where there's a lot of distraction, so not necessarily one's homeland, but a place where, for example, there's a lot of people, you're constantly hearing people talking, or maybe it's just a place where you have a lot of nice distractions, such as good Wi-Fi and shows to watch. In such places, the mind is constantly distracted by a thing. It's constantly following after some kind of distraction. And that is the cause for the afflictive emotions to actually increase. So that's why we need to go to a place where we can decrease our distractions and let the mind calm down a little bit so that we are not further planting the seeds or the latent tendencies of further afflictive emotions. So we're not creating more habits for the three poisons to proliferate, because such busy places of a lot of distraction will cause the three poisons to increase rather than decrease. So by avoiding such places of distraction, which here is said to, as avoiding the homeland, and by going to a solitary place, then that is how we can actually let our afflictive emotions decrease and then have the opportunity to transform them as well.
le dambo janju sembegi le dambo nyamlen chigen denzo sungu yores. Tadi tos sigita tadi yulla rale Malaysia ba mar simla rale yures pena ke naming ke daji kogu na tani yang arangzo chache pije chache molam amare tanda liu duma nang doas de karo jitar mig yul da na chinang no jungo bo ta na yang dagze me be ngala shok sidu zan de sha tu ge jitar Kanse, jita na we the dark by yin na minin zimbi danam gwe dark no samno de ngala shok says do yang this dark ho on the dark rang ge takji ji che on the dark nanglo do chila do kawa do takji ta na da nyi ji mare dark ra la do bre Then Dala Sona, Dragi, Dilla Dini, and around the Drota Mewa Chadu. Did Diapo, did Diapo Mindu said, Drotagumare. Then around the Yomo Peleto, the Drotak said it, Drotak says it. Diapo Mindus in it. Whenever and Dakrangla, the Dubers and Dubever. Yomo Krangla and Dubever, the Naranzo Drotan, Yapo Mare, Ducha said. Simki Tasha Jurtamato, Tella Nigan is you do money, you Eugene there to go mares. That Dendeke Caranzo talks in Yamle Chituke, young understanding how Kogingina, then you'll rally mares, and that the Hamagina, you'll the never do Pangueta, then the embating Gueti gets much hard to be rest.
But of course, this is here. The text is really addressing beginners. This is for beginners because later on, really, your practice will not depend on the place you are in. It's all dependent on the mind, right? So in terms of like conditions of distraction, even when such conditions arise, then once one is a more advanced practitioner, one can practice as it is said in the prayer in 7 chapters. Do this towards all that you hear, all sounds grasped as sweet or harsh, whilst hearing them empty, without afterthought remain, and so on. So basically, all sounds that we hear, whether sweet or harsh, whether pleasant or unpleasant, these are all judgments, these are all imputations of the mind. To see their empty nature resting without imputing any judgment of good or bad on whatever we see or on whatever we hear, that is the practice. And so it's really a matter of the practitioner and the practitioner's capacity to practice in this way, because in essence, all of our perceptions of the environment around us, whether it's a cause of distraction or not, and so on, all of these are just imputations of the mind. And really, it's the imputations that are the root, at the root of the problem. So to rest the mind without any imputation, that is then the practice. Sama labin na
La.
Sama shina. Di
This. The Drotas Shabati Kitchenbury, Drotas Jesunza, Casaling as a single Papa, Marushila, and then Dixon, Tarare, Ani, the Jumare.
Daddy Tsering Kandi.
All.
So I think this was our last question.
Then I watch against.
So we'll do a dedication of today's virtue.
Gone Gondu Belvarai show Tambaji, comes the Jamba, that Tambani vision to some Tenzebel of Darjing by Temba, Urin the Betaji.